Alright, I've got a bit of an inside scoop to talk to you about in the middle of this one. I've been chatting to a few developers about their experiences leading up to the Switch 2 launch, so that might be of interest. And I will share one significant issue that I've experienced. You do not need to give me many excuses to revisit Nier Automata, and it remains to this day one of my favorite games I experienced for the first time on the Nintendo Switch. And I remember all of you in the comments saying, my goodness, you're in for a treat, and you were not wrong. Multiple playthroughs, some of those part of the intrinsic experience, no spoilers, no spoilers, but the chance to pick it up once more on Switch 2 to see how it performs, well, it's too much to resist. So how does Nier Automata perform on Nintendo Switch 2? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. Remember, we're giving away a Switch 2 in the coming, well, week and a half. Now, let's find out. So let's take a look at the Switch 1 performance then. Now, it wasn't shocking, it was actually okay. However, there were lots of times where performance wasn't great. Here was my take on that aspect.
There are a few areas like the Forest Kingdom which caused the Switch to struggle a bit.
Now, while we've got that in the background, I'll talk to you about that thing I said at the start. Now, lots of developers, bigger indies, smaller indies, we know that they didn't receive dev kits, right? Like, we know that. And since the Switch came out, I've been reaching out to a few friends in the industry, and they're not working for small indie teams. These are like some of the bigger players saying, you know, are you going to have patches for these games coming out? And I'll be honest, most of them are like, well, no, because Nintendo, one, didn't give us a dev kit, and two, this is the interesting part, is none of them knew the effect that the emulation would have on their games. So it's not like Nintendo were saying, hey, look, here's your game, this is how it's going to run, you'll need to do this. It was absolute radio silence until launch day. They obviously then go to play their games or see that they've made it onto the naughty list, as we shall call it, but had no real way of actually testing what the issue is because they don't have a dev kit. So for people like me, Switch Corner Alex, a friend of mine, who really do want some of these patches to come along, we might have quite the weight on our hands because the teams simply haven't had those dev kits and now have to kind of go back and potentially fix some issues before they can even get onto that. And these tests that we're doing on unpatched games are essentially in what Nintendo calls compatibility mode, which doesn't sound particularly good, does it? Now, with that said, you've got teams like From Software who have clearly had dev kits from the start, have dev kits right now. The bigger players, EA, Ubisoft, they're not going to release patches, are they? They're just not going to bother. Not unless they can make a bit of bunts out of it. So yeah. Just thought I'd share that with you because it was a bit depressing to hear, to be honest. On the flip side of that though, I've spoken to 3 developers who have Switch 1 games coming out, and they were originally just planned for Switch 1, who are actively looking to make sure there's a patch so that they can run properly on Switch 2 as well with the proper visuals. And a lot of them have said, hey look, as much as possible we're going to make them free. So that's good. That is a positive amongst the negatives that I've just given you. So Nier Automata, as we saw from the footage that was playing in the background, had a few issues here and there, but then we jump over to the Nintendo Switch 2, and performance, well, it was capped out, or maxed out I should say, at 30 frames per second in both docked and handheld modes. And yes, it is now able to hit that all the time. Performance is flawless in that regard. Frame time is around 32 milliseconds, and I cannot get it to drop down. Now, I think this one uses VSync, or vertical synchronization, to tie the frame rate to the refresh rate. It's something you sometimes notice where there's a little bit of an input latency. Now, I wouldn't say it's latent here, if that is such a word, but it's certainly not as precise and quick as I've experienced in some other titles. The visual quality though looks a lot better than when the game came out originally. It's a stunning game anyway. I think most of that, or a lot of it at least, is down to the artistic direction in those post-apocalyptic environments, but equally so the animations on the main protagonist. The way that she moves is incredibly good, isn't it? Even today. Now, I think a lot of that is down to Platinum Games, who are obviously renowned for the Bayonetta series, having an involvement in this. Well, more than just an involvement. And there was one area that I really was keen to test out, and that's on the roller coaster. I remember the game just almost breaking when I played that on Switch 1, and here, no problems whatsoever. 30 frames per second, no stuttering, no loading issues. absolutely fine. And the image quality really has benefited from the horsepower under the hood of the Switch 2 because it never drops resolution. It maintains the max resolution of the Switch 1 port and it looks so much crisper. Now I know some of you have just spat your tea out, you're looking at that going, that's not crisp, Mark, what are you talking about? But when you compare it directly to the Switch 1 version, it's clear that it's seen a significant bump in overall fidelity. There's less aliasing, certainly on the main protagonist. She's looking very smooth and stuff. And the game actually could reach a docked mode 1080p on Switch 1 for about 5% of the time, but it would drop down a little from time to time as well. And it was 720p 30 in handheld. So it was certainly a good port originally, but it needed a bit of TLC and it saw it in the form of a few patches, but it never hit that perfection point. To be sure, it's not perfect, but it is very, very good. However, there's a major glaring issue, I'm afraid, and it comes in the form of sporadic crashes. Now, the way that Nintendo are emulating these games, no one really knows, to be honest, but they have their compatibility list, and I don't even know where this one falls on that, but sadly I've hit a few random crashes. Some of them happen when there's a bunch of action going on, some of them happen just when I'm strolling along, remembering why I love this game so much. I think I've had 3, which in about 2 hours of testing, it's really upsetting because I just wanted to dive back in and do another run. I can't believe it was 3 years ago that this one originally launched on Switch. But if you haven't played it and you've got a Switch 2, you just need to know that you are going to experience a couple of crashes. It does save every time you use those transport booths, and load times, well, they're okay. They were always slightly longer on the Switch version. They're not terrible. There's certainly been many worse games. The Outer Worlds, which I revisited a couple of days ago, was the most ludicrously long load times I've ever seen, even on Switch 2. But here, about 20 to 25 seconds is still longer than I want to be waiting. In handheld, those visual and performance carryovers do remain, and it is enjoyable. I didn't have any crashes in handheld, so maybe that's the way. Now, I'm sure many of you watching this are just massive Nier Automata fans, and like me, you just wanted to see the game again. It gets a bit like that. It's one of those titles. Let me know in the comments, which games would you like to see me revisit next? As I said, my mate Alex over at Switch Corner, he's done a bunch of these as well, and they're very good, so do go check out some of his. But thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. Remember, we have that Nintendo Switch 2 to give away. I mean, I say remember, I haven't stopped banging on about it. Not since that person was like, have you though? Have you got a Switch 2? And I was like, no, I really have. Like, it was like, if they could have seen me in this little cupboard that I sit in to record, I had the 100-yard stare. And I was staring through the internet right at them. Oh, we've got it, and I can't wait for the person to receive it. It's gonna be good times. Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy this content. Stick around for more, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!